Them horns, baby. Them horns. Mixed martial arts. Mixed martial arts. How do we like our martial arts? We like 'em mixed. Woo!
Well, I think mix is an appropriate word for what has gone down today. And I mean, I don't really know what to say. I think I'll start this off by saying that oftentimes we are very negative when it comes to the quote-unquote MMA gods. The MMA gods give it, they take it away. They usually take it away more than they giveth. This is a little different because how we were feeling when we woke up this morning, we were feeling a certain way. And then all of a sudden, something really bad happens at weigh-ins and Khamzat Chimaev misses weight by 7.5 pounds. And we're thinking to ourselves, oh my God, what's going to happen now? And for once, the MMA gods, they shine down upon Las Vegas, Nevada, and they made things right. We actually have a better card 24 hours away from UFC 279. We have a brand new main event, Nate Diaz versus Tony Ferguson. The fight we should have gotten in the first place. Khamzat Chimaev still remains on the card. He will take on Kevin Holland in the 5-round co-main event. Li Jingliang, what a gangster he is, fighting a man who weighted almost 10 pounds heavier than him, and Daniel Rodriguez. Props to all of these guys who are stepping up and shifting things around, and I'm excited to talk about it with all of you. I am Mike Heck. Thank you for joining us for this live UFC 279 preview show. Once again, being joined by Shaun Al-Shatti. I feel like I've just seen you for like 2 hours straight.
Let's go, Mike Heck.
And of course, we have to put the cherry on top of the Positivity Sunday with the Prince himself, Alexander K. Lee. Look at him. Looks like he just spent a week in Puerto Vallarta. Look how tan he looks. Dude looks ready to go. He's shining. So, AK, I want to start with you because we haven't gotten your reaction to all of these changes. The way you woke up today, the way you felt about this card compared to where it's at right now. Where are you at? What has this day been like for you?
Mike, somehow the UFC chose the path of most resistance putting this card together. And yet ended up with the card that it should have been all along. I mean, this is classic falling upwards. If you want to talk about why the UFC is so great, I mean, one thing, its ability to kind of shift and adapt, and that's fine. Credit to them, credit to the team, everyone behind the scenes, all the managers of fighters who make these things happen. So credit to all those people for sure. But also, man, it's just like this company really just can't fail. Like, I mean, this for almost any other sporting organization. And it's impossible to compare, again, like whatever, an NFL event or an NBA event, whatever you want to call, to like a UFC event like this. But for them to hit this kind of road bump, it would just be it would be extremely damaging to the product and the brand. For the UFC, again, somehow that is not the case. Somehow everyone, at least if we're just kind of glancing at social media, everyone seems to agree. Like, well, it's really bad that Khamzat missed weight. But look at these great fights we ended up with, which we wanted all along. Nate Diaz, Tony Ferguson, great fight. Should have happened years ago. Khamzat, Kevin Holland, bad blood. I mean, these guys have been trying to fight each other forever. Even Li Jingliang versus Daniel Rodriguez. It feels like it's taking place at catchweight, but it feels like a meaningful welterweight contest with stakes. Like whoever wins that fight is actually going to advance up the rankings. And again, this is not as you're talking about, this is not what we were looking forward to. This morning we had all these other narratives in play. What does this mean for Nate Diaz? What does it mean for Khamzat? Because this crazy matchup no one saw coming. Why is Tony Ferguson fighting Li Jingliang? We had so many questions, and now that we've settled on the card that we have, the questions just don't seem as bizarre anymore. It seems like we just have very nice looking top 3 fights on this main card, and if I hadn't just lived through it for the last 12 hours, I would not have believed how it came together.
This will be a great 30 for 30 someday. The changing of the UFC 279 lineup. Shaun, I talked to you about this right before we went live. We reacted to it. Poetic was a word that was thrown out quite a bit. But when I saw the actual graphic, watching it on the UFC YouTube channel of the ceremonial weigh-in, when I saw the actual graphic and Joe Rogan talking over it, with a picture of Nate Diaz on one side and a picture of Tony Ferguson on the other side. And Tony gets up to the scale and he talks to Joe Rogan. He says, get your popcorn and your blue slushies ready because we're going to have some effing fun out here. And then Nate cuts his promo, putting Tony over. I mean, this is feel-good television, is it not?
Let's go, Mike. Yes, absolutely. Are you kidding me? Oh my God. What a day, man. Like, sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. And this is one of those days where truth is infinitely more strange than fiction could ever be. The blood gods taketh away often from us. The MMA gods are very cruel to us, but God, they giveth us something today. Like, this was nuts, the way that this all plays out and the way that we sort of end up with the fights that we should have had regardless. Because I've already seen some people sort of picking at this of like, oh, you're excited about a main event where the two guys are like 1-7 in their last 8. That's not what this is about. And if you think that's what this is about, you're just a bad MMA fan. Regardless, it's two legitimate legends of the game, and they deserve to go out in better ways than they were going to go out. Because we all know what this was initially, what UFC 279 was going to be initially. It was, hey, Nate Diaz, this guy who's sort of been a thorn in our side if you're the UFC, but has made us insane amount of money and who for so long we took advantage of to such an extreme degree, right? Like I pointed this out earlier in the day, but this is a guy who in 2015 made 16 grand in year 7 of his UFC career. 3 fights removed from challenging for the lightweight title. He made 16 grand to lose to the guy, Rafael dos Anjos, who was about to fight for the lightweight title and win it. He made 16 grand to win that fight. That was 7 years ago. And now all of a sudden he was going to get pushed out the door against a bad stylistic matchup against a guy they were trying to paint as the next superstar of this division, the next champion of this division, and just get thrown out like old news. And instead, he gets a fight, a much more reasonable, competitive fight against a fellow legend of the game, someone who has been in the trenches, who deserving of this spot for a long time. And that's when you say, you had a moment watching those weigh-ins, just, an appreciation for what we're getting here for Tony Ferguson and all of it. I'm right there with you, Mike. I had a little moment earlier where it's just like, man, Tony finally got it. Like Tony, the luck finally came back around the other way. Tony finally ended up on the good side of the luck because you know me, I've been the driver of the Tony Ferguson bandwagon for like a decade at this point. This is a guy who is one of the greatest lightweights of all time. He's one of the greatest lightweights to ever put on a pair of 4-ounce gloves. He deserved a big fight for years. He had an unprecedented win streak in the lightweight division. There's never been someone who has won as many fights as him and not challenged for an undisputed title. He had earned a fight against Conor McGregor, a big giant payday to sort of make it for his career. He earned that. He didn't get it. He earned a fight like Nate Diaz or like Khabib Nurmagomedov or whatever, and he never, ever got it. He stepped up in the middle of a pandemic, first guy to step up and say, hey, I don't care. I'm going to give away my spot. I'm going to wager my spot against Justin Gaethje because the people need entertainment in these really dark times. He lost, and ever since then, and he has just gotten eulogies written after him. He's saying he should be of this. And he was just going to go out in the game never having had that big payday. And now, 24 hours before a card where, again, a lot of us, myself included, someone who is, again, the Tony Ferguson bandwagon driver, saying, why are you going to welterweight? Why on earth is the UFC booking this fight against Li Jingliang? None of this makes any sense at all. All of a sudden, Tony Ferguson's fighting Nate Diaz, probably for much, 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 much more money than he was ever going to make beforehand. It's a fight that we should have had a long time ago. And again, it's such a fitting way for these two guys to go out. I know this isn't the end for Tony, but it probably is the end for Nate. And it's just at least something for at the end of Tony's career for him to hold on to and to get this kind of opportunity. It's beautiful, Mike. It's absolutely beautiful. It's poetic justice. The way this came together is, again, the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. I've been in this industry a decade. I've never seen something come together in the way that this came together, but it is poetic justice. It's beautiful, and I love it.
Yes, I was hoping the horns were going to come, and they were well-deserved there. It's amazing how anybody complains about this, if we're being honest, because these are the same people who back in the spring were like, ooh, I have to watch WrestleMania so I can watch 57-year-old Steve Austin go toe-to-toe with Kevin Owens. I mean, come on. We get 2 OGs, 2 fun fighters. Whether they win or whether they lose, they're going to go in there and scrap. And these two guys, while they have a ton of respect for each other, are just going to go in and get after it. There's no questions about Nate. We don't have to think about a terribly sad ending here. We potentially could have seen 2 very sad endings on this card. Instead, we get 2 guys who deserve this opportunity, deserve this spot. This should have been the freaking fight to be made in the first place. And here we are, those 2 guys getting after it to close the show. This is a way better card than it was before. We do have betting lines here. Since obviously the card's been updated. Tony Ferguson is the favorite. It was minus 135. Some money's coming in on Nate already. It's minus 125. Comeback on Nate is plus 105. So it's a pretty close fight. AK, obviously the names are great. We want to have these 2 guys fight each other and get these great opportunities. But when you look at this matchup stylistically now, this is obviously not Nate versus Khamzat. This is not Tony versus Li Jingliang. This is the fight that should have been all along. How do you break this one down? How do you look at it from a stylistic perspective? What should we, is there really, are we even thinking about game plans, or we just chuck it all that out the window and let's just go in there and throw hands at each other?
No, of course. But listen, both guys want to win. Right? Both guys have pride. I mean, they're definitely going to go in there and want to put on a fight of the night level performance. I mean, this is now your immediate front runner. Apologies to everyone else, all the other fighters in the card, but you are essentially at a deficit right now because they are saving that $50,000, those two $50,000 bonus checks probably for Nate Diaz and Tony Ferguson. It's going to be a 5-rounder, which is great. These guys are going to get time to work, time to build up, time to taunt, time to really have some fun with it. A 3-rounder would have been great too, but a 5-rounder, it really feels like these 2 deserve it. Nate Diaz was already prepared for one. Tony Ferguson scheduled for a 3-rounder. You know he's always ready to go 5, so that's exciting. I think the great thing is, as we said, like both guys are like they want to win, but they're gonna also they know it doesn't really matter as far as their like Tony Ferguson has lost 4 straight fights. If he loses a 5th one, I mean, oddly, I don't think that's going to necessarily mean he gets released. Normally, you lose 5 straight, you're gone. I don't think that's a factor here. I think everyone agreeing to this reshuffling is probably going to put them in a good light with the UFC. He is also moving up a weight class, which is good. So, whatever happens, should he lose Nate Diaz, they probably say, well, one more kick at the can at 170. Let's see how it goes. So, he's kind of free to do what he wants and free to have this dream fight with Diaz that guys like him have been chasing for so long. And for Nate, of course, we've talked a lot about this. Very, very, very likely being his last fight. Who knows? Maybe the UFC makes a dream offer if he gets a win and they somehow bring him back. But it seems like that both sides are pretty content to part ways after this. Again, the UFC kind of ready to move on from the Nate Diaz saga. They've done a lot of good business together. Nate Diaz, of course, aiming for opportunities outside the UFC, including very likely a fight with Jake Paul, which will make him maybe more money than he's ever made in the UFC. So knowing all that, knowing that we don't care about rankings, this isn't for a contendership, and both guys would just really seem to have a respect for each other, but not in the way that they won't be willing to beat each other's brains in. It's super exciting. So I do think we're going to see a fight that's both guys want to win for sure, but also heavy emphasis on entertainment. And if they both get a $50,000 check out of it, then they're going to enjoy that as well.
AK, I forgot to ask you, what's the new gymnastics scale?
Oh gosh, it's higher. It has to be higher now. Right? I'll say I threw up a poll. What do you think of the UFC? What do you think of the UFC 279 lineup shakeup? And I don't think I've ever seen any of the polls I've thrown up be so unanimous in one direction. Better or worse? 89% say better. So overwhelming. I think people are like us. They're like, yeah, why wasn't this the card to begin with? So I think earlier we were kind of looking ahead to this, Mike. I was like, it's kind of like in the low 8s range, which for a pay-per-view is really bad. Like a pay-per-view should start at like 9. So if you're falling into the 8 range, that's like, again, a good fight night or something like that. So it's definitely higher than that. I'll go as high as a 9 now, 9.1, 9.2, because I do think we could see something special in the main event. I love the Chimaev Holland matchup. I know we'll talk about that more. Like that's a fight we've wanted to see for so long. And I even think that Li Jingliang and Daniel Rodriguez is a nice matchup. It's a really nice, welterweight as catchweight matchup. So and I'm judging the rest of the card. Honestly, I don't think it's that bad. Maybe because we've sort of talked ourselves into it. So I'll be happy to say 9.1, 9.2 if everything goes well and we don't have any major clunkers.
Shaun, we talk a lot about some of these main events and co-main events, mixed martial arts competitions, like high-level martial arts competitions. I'm not saying that these fights aren't, but I feel like the front runner in this conversation is actually the Daniel Rodriguez Li Jingliang fight. I feel like the other two are just going to be freaking fights. Like Nate and Tony are just going to get in there and fight. And this is all respect there. Khamzat Chimaev and Kevin Holland are going to fight. It's much more personal there. But how do you view this new main event from like a stylistic perspective? Because the way I see it, these two dudes are just going to fight. They're just going to have a fight for as long as this thing lasts, which could go the full 25.
Yeah, it's a much more fitting way for this event to end, because it felt like in the initial permutation of it, right, between the co-main event and the main event, it just felt like we were going to have a bad time. Like we're going to leave the event feeling bad to some degree about what we just watched. I don't know that that's going to be the case anymore. Like Nate Diaz and Tony Ferguson are on similar levels and trajectories at their, the late stages of their career. They're both very competitive. They have very nice styles that match up too. Like this is just like something we haven't even talked about throughout this whole past 12 hours, but like Nate Diaz and Tony Ferguson are both excellent boxers, very creative with very creative groundwork, who just generally are down to scrap, who are going to get bloody, who are going to brawl, and who are just going to bring a really good show. And like that, if that's what we get for 25 minutes or however long this lasts, that is wonderful. That is a much better situation than whatever we were probably going to get. And I'm here for it. And same with the co-main event. Like this is maybe not the way that we were looking to see Kevin Holland tested, of like, hey, have you figured out your wrestling yet? Like, oh, hey, here's one of the best wrestlers in the UFC today. Like, deal with it. But regardless, like this is an interesting spot to see Khamzat Chimaev function in, because it did feel like this whole week, I don't want to say the moment was getting to him a little too much, but it did feel like the moment was a little big for him and that he was handling it in a strange way. And I don't know, maybe this is a smaller step down. Maybe we'll see, what happens when this guy actually has bad blood. We just saw at the presser yesterday that these guys do not like each other. They have feuded for over a year at this point. I think stylistically, obviously, Khamzat is the favorite in the co-main event, and I'm sure we'll get into it. But just generally, the way both these fights square up, how they match up, the intangibles with both guys, just the bare facts, the tail of the tape, like all of this is much better. And you're right. The third fight, Rodriguez versus Leach, which, by the way, we haven't given credit yet to Leach. I think we need to give massive amount of credit to Leach, because this is a guy who bought the sleekest, cleanest new suit that no one really got a chance to see. Like that suit was spectacular. So kudos to you, Leach. I hope you get a chance to use that at some point in the post-fight presser or wherever. I hope you show up at the arena with it, because that was clean as hell. Bought that suit, didn't get a chance, and now he has to fight a much smaller name than he was going to fight, Daniel Rodriguez, rather than Tony Ferguson. And also, by the way, someone who's like 10 pounds heavier than him. So, that dude is the ultimate badass. All of this is just the way, I can't say it enough, but the way all this played out is just so much more compelling, so much more interesting than what we were going to get. And credit to everyone involved. I hope all of them made infinitely bigger paydays than they were going to. And I think any fan who is disrespecting anybody involved in this whole process, other than perhaps the man who missed weight by 7.5 pounds, what are you doing? Because all these guys just put this together at the last second and a lot of them agreed to terms that were worse off for them. And it's just going to be a beautiful, beautiful card compared to what we were going to get.
We'll dive in more into the co-main event in a moment. Nate Diaz, Tony, we talked about what Tony Ferguson said to get the crowd all riled up. Nate Diaz cuts an all-time promo on what seems to be his final ceremonial weigh-in in the UFC, taking shots at Khabib, taking shots at Chimaev, and he just went over like Rover. So let's just make a pick here, because I feel like at the end of this, we're just going to be so giddy with what we saw between these two guys. Let's just get into the picks, AK. This is not what we expected. And hearing the word on this preview show, wonderful, so many times is not something I expected to hear. but now, because of this card, we're hearing it. So, AK, who gets this thing done tomorrow? Now you have to redo all your predictions and get that all prepped. Is it going to be Nate Diaz leaving the UFC, at least for now, coming off of a victory, or is Tony Ferguson going to spoil the party here?
Joke's on you, my best friend. I didn't start the predictions. Always, always. Listen, tip out there for anyone wanting to work in the MMA field who ends up doing predictions. Always procrastinate. Always procrastinate. I knew that something funny was going to happen. I think we all did. It's crazy to me, because in my mind, if this fight had happened like a year ago, or this fight happened 2 years ago, 3 years ago, in my mind, Tony Ferguson is a better fighter than Nate Diaz. I'm pretty sure. But I also have said, I think the last 2 times Tony fought, that I would never pick. Which fight was it? I think it was after I don't want to say the Del Bronx fight. It was after the Dariush fight. Darius fight, I was like, I can't pick Tony again. I have to set a rule. I can't pick Tony again, barring like some bizarre, him being booked into some like clear mismatch in his favor. And that is not what this is. That's not what this is. Whether Diaz has one foot out the door or not, when he gets in there, he's almost always motivated. So unless we think he's going to do the, what Jed and Damon have been screaming for him to just throw the fight and leave the octagon, I think he wins this. I think Diaz wins this one. I just think he's got a little bit more left in the tank. I hope Tony proves me wrong. Like I said, I hope we at least get a super competitive fight. But I like Diaz over 5 rounds. I think he wins a stand-up battle. I like him in this one. So, hashtag Diaz Army, I guess.
Shaun, I feel like if Tony was fighting Li Jingliang, Khamzat Chimaev, or freaking Godzilla, you're picking Tony Ferguson anyways, just because you pick with your heart in these types of situations. But now we have a much more even matchup in a lot of ways. Will Tony Ferguson get it done? Will he send Nate Diaz off with probably a fight of the night bonus, but a loss? Or does Nate Diaz leave with the victory?
Look, Mike Heck, I am nothing if not a loyal man. I'm a very, very loyal man. You're right. I'm gonna make the pick regardless. But this truly is one of those fights. It's such a cliche to say, but it is truly one of those fights where you kind of wish both guys could win. Like if they could figure out some way to do that, like I would be here for that. But you got to remember, like, I know the Michael Chandler knockout kind of clouds how we are thinking of Tony Ferguson right now, at least as a sport. Like, that was a really, really bad knockout, probably knockout of the year if Leon Edwards didn't just do what he did to Kamaru Usman. Tony Ferguson looked pretty good in that first round. Like, he arguably won that first round against Michael Chandler. At the end of that first round in that fight, I was like, hey, man, that's kind of like some throwback Tony. Like maybe he does still have a little bit left in the tank, and then he gets hit with what he gets hit with. Nate Diaz isn't Michael Chandler, and that he's not going to come to this fight bringing tons of power shots and huge kicks and things like that. Like we know what we're going to see from Nate Diaz. It's going to be a volume boxing attack with some slick grappling. That's very much what Tony seems like he can handle historically, and especially at this point in his career. I think this is a very, very legitimately intriguing and winnable fight for Tony Ferguson from a stylistic perspective. And again, I saw enough from the first round of that Michael Chandler fight to not write this guy off as all the way done. Like Tony Ferguson to me still feels like he has some left in the tank. Maybe just not against these top 5, top 7, top 10 guys anymore, but I don't think that's what Nate Diaz is either. I like the idea of Tony Ferguson being at 170, not having to do that weight cut. That was always a difficult weight cut for him. I like the idea of him having branched out over the past few months, exploring different teams, different coaches, various, just opportunities that he didn't really explore or enjoy for most of his career. He was kind of doing it himself, and now he's sort of looking for help, and it seems to have filled in a little bit of the gaps. This is a different Tony Ferguson than we saw a couple months ago against Michael Chandler. And also, I will say, do we know how much Nate Diaz cared about this fight in terms of preparation for when it came to Khamzat Chimaev? It felt like Nate was not coming into this I don't want to say not trying, but it felt like Nate was maybe letting it go a bit coming into this, like, whatever, let's just get this done and then we can move on to what's next. You can't change that overnight. That's still sort of how he's coming into it, if that's how he was going to come into it. Obviously, that's me speculating. All of that is a roundabout way to say Tony Ferguson's going to get this done, and I'm not going to say he's going to be back, but Tony Ferguson's going to get another win, and it's been a long time. We've been waiting for it. I'm calling it.
So I'm with you. I wish we could have a draw scenario where both guys actually won. There's no disappointment or anything like that. Both guys feel like winners, and I feel like we're all going to feel like winners when this is all said and done. I'm going to go with maybe the best case scenario. Nate Diaz wins a very close split decision. It's a fight that we're all going to be applauding when it's all over. These two guys are going to be bloody. They're going to leave it all in the octagon. Nate's literally going to leave the octagon for the final time, at least for now. Who knows if he comes back in the future. But it's going to be such a good fight that we're not going to even really be thinking about who won and who lost. I think both guys' stocks are going to rise. I think it's just going to be a super fun fight. And I think we're going to end the night in a way where chaos will probably ensue for 25 minutes, but we're going to feel good about it. We're going to feel good about it. We're going to come back on the post-fight show. We're going to be singing Kumbaya. We're going to be very positive about all of this because this ended in just the most perfect way for Nate, for Ferguson, for all of us. In the end, for the UFC, because I think the business is going to be a lot better with how this all shaped up. It's just one of those situations where we're like, wow, we don't get to talk about such positivity so much, but at the end of this night, I think we're going to be feeling a certain way. I think we're going to be feeling good about ourselves, and we're going to be feeling good about Nate's future. We're going to be feeling good about Tony Ferguson's future. Everybody wins, but I think Nate's going to win a decision. It's just going to be a fun fight, and I can't wait to see it. So let's get to the real heat, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get to this co-main event. 5 rounds. Khamzat Chimaev, who, like we talked about earlier, massive weight miss. He didn't seem to really care all that much that he had a massive weight miss, even saying something to the effect of, that's not so bad. Then he flips people off, that he's posting all these weird photos on social media of him and Darren Till all blown up, these memes, all sorts of craziness. And even, I just want to start here, Shaun, because we talked a lot about this on the Twitter space. New York Rick comes in and says that in a weird way, we should all be thanking Khamzat Chimaev for missing weight because it all led to this. And we even joked that we're going to title this UFC 279 post-fight show, Thank You, Khamzat. But we were wondering how Khamzat was going to lean into this. Was he just going to be like, all right, whatever? Or was he going to be just lean in and be a full-on heel? And he just ran to that stage, gets in Holland's face, security's there breaking him up, and Joe Rogan goes and talks to him, and he cuts a freaking heel promo and a half. How would you grade what Khamzat Chimaev did at this ceremonial weigh-ins with this new fight, everything involved? Did he just kill it? Did he just knock an A+, considering how bad the situation was 8 hours ago?
Well, first I have to say kudos to Kyle Johnson in the comments, who wrote, "Can't wait for Tony to throw imaginary sand at Nate's face," and really cracked me up during that. I was giggling that whole time I was on mute. How did Khamzat do? I mean, I'm taking this as a whole, not from just the weigh-ins, but the whole day. Like, I know we're all happy about how this turned out, but that we are looking at one of the all-time bag fumblings that this man just did. Like, this is crazy how badly Khamzat Chimaev botched this whole week, right? Because this was a guy who, again, we have talked about it for weeks at this point, months, since this fight was booked. This was essentially a golden ticket to stardom to a certain degree, right? Like, Khamzat Chimaev has been obviously pinpointed by the UFC as the next guy, the next mainstream star, the next champion in this division. So what are you going to do? You can throw him against Nate Diaz. All of us within the space saw it for what it was. All of us within, like, general MMA hardcores, fans, etc., people who are watching this show right now, we understood what this was. But you look on the outside, you look at the casual fans, the people who know maybe 3 or 4 UFC fighters total. Nate Diaz is one of those guys, and it was very clear that this was the chance for Khamzat Chimaev to become one of those guys by the end of Saturday night. And if not, at least be known as, to the casual fan, as, oh, that's that really scary bearded dude who just ground Nate Diaz into a fine powder. Like, that was what this was going to be for him. And he was going to get the next title shot against the winner of the trilogy fight between Usman and Edwards. He was probably just going to be able to sit out and enjoy, himself for a while, and then come in whenever that was done and just get the next one. And it was destined for him. Like, this is the path that had been laid out in front of him. And he totally just blew it, all within a span of like 24 hours. Like, it is crazy to the degree to which he bungled this. And now we're left in a point where he was just getting booed. Like, he was just getting massive, massive boos, like nuclear heat in that arena in Las Vegas. I think he did not endear himself to a lot of the MMA community in terms of the fan base with the way he handled the weigh-in miss, but also just like how unapologetic he was about it, where he's just like posting memes and he's just kind of like flipping off the cameras and giggling and stuff. Like, you miss weight by 7.5 pounds for a main event that you're about to make millions of dollars for. Like, that's a very, very bizarre reaction to have in my eyes. And I think a lot of people see that and that doesn't sit well with them. Obviously this is all short-term, right? Like, the MMA fan base has a very short-term memory where if Khamzat comes out there, demolishes Kevin Holland within a round, and then just cuts a great promo, I'm sure he'll be back in the good graces of people pretty quickly. But this does, in the long term, delay what it felt like, and maybe still is, inevitable when it comes to this guy, because he is definitely not going to get the next title shot even if he beats Kevin Holland on Saturday. Like, Khamzat Chimaev will have to fight somebody else. He is not going to get rewarded by the UFC and allowed to sit out and wait the winner of this trilogy, regardless of how dominant he is or is not on Saturday. Like, he cost himself quite a bit, probably of money, I would imagine, but also just quite a bit of standing within this division, at least in the short term, with the way he handled it. So sure, like, he's leaning into it at weigh-ins, which that's cool. There's 2 ways to handle it, right? You're apologetic, or you just lean real hard and you sort of be the heel, if you want to use pro wrestling terms. He's choosing the latter. that's an interesting way to do it. That certainly sort of changes, I think, the way we're going to look at Khamzat Chimaev moving forward. It felt like the whole smash you sort of vibe that he was rolling with had kind of run its course a bit. We talked about this earlier, I think, on our Twitter Spaces, but this is maybe now his new thing. He's going to kind of just play the heel a little bit. That's interesting. But he did certainly cost himself quite a bit, I would say, short-term and long-term when it comes to this division. And it's just a very bizarre day and handled very, very strangely.
100%. And he is at fault for all of this crazy day. It's all about him. In the end, we get a great result because the MMA gods were in a good mood. Maybe they didn't have a couple of 40s last night. They woke up feeling fresh, no hangover, and they took that good energy and they placed it upon the rest of us. So, AK, we talked about Chimaev and Diaz and what was at stake, and it felt like Khamzat had obviously all the pressure on him to kind of just put this guy out to pasture for the UFC and so forth, and he seemed to like this. And while that was a must-win fight, now he's in this situation because Shaun mentioned how he's bungled the bag, he's dropped the ball, and this big weight miss, and how fans are viewing him right now compared to where we were in April during UFC 273 when the guy was the freaking talk of the town in Jacksonville, Florida. So what happens if Khamzat Chimaev loses to Kevin Holland tomorrow? Is this the fastest fall from grace you have ever seen? Because we've seen some big ones and we could do a whole list about them, but to see what has happened in the last 24 hours, if he goes out and loses to Kevin Holland, if Kevin Holland just punches him right in his face and knocks him out in the second round of this fight, how bad is this for Khamzat Chimaev? Can he come back from this?
First, let me say, New York Rick and I are kindred spirits. We tend to agree on a lot of things. I'm actually we are brothers in arms against the rising tide of open scoring. That's a whole other discussion, which we don't need to get into right now. And so part of me, like when he brought up, he's doing this whole hashtag thank you Khamzat thing. I mean, I was raising my eyebrow at first, but now I'm kind of like, okay, I'm starting to see his side of it. I do kind of understand it's changing his gimmick a little bit, as you would say, kind of in pro wrestling. It's kind of a new gimmick. It's definitely turning heel, whether he intended to or not at the beginning of the week. And as we know, bad behavior is very often rewarded in MMA. However, Mike, as you have posed in your question, all of this stuff we were talking about, his shift in personality and shift in how people are perceiving him, is pretty dependent on him, continuing this unbeaten streak. Because you need to do that so people have that. Oh, I want to see this guy lose. I will tune in every time this guy fights. I want to see the one who knocks this guy off. There's probably some appeal in that with Khabib as well. I don't know. I don't know if he was a full-on heel necessarily. I think he was pretty well liked, but definitely people watch him. Floyd Mayweather, if we want to go to boxing, there you go. I'm definitely a huge heel. People always want to see Mayweather lose. So there's an appeal to that. There's an appeal in being that bad guy, and people want to see you especially catch that zero. Lose that zero, excuse me, which is, as Chimaev has been very impressive in the cage so far. So losing on Saturday to Kevin Holland, I mean, I think pretty devastating. It's a guy also he's had beef with, so this isn't some rando. This is a guy who's been saying for a long time that he can beat Chimaev. He's got the skills to do it. It's going to draw a lot of attention to this fight because it's personal, and that's great. But it just raises the stakes to another level because he's talked so much. Kevin Holland has talked so much. He cannot lose to this guy. It's as devastating as when Colby Covington was trash talking people, and Colby Covington lost to them. I would say a lot of people that Colby beat his rivalries, Jorge Masvidal, for example, they're never going to quite recover from those losses. I mean, that's just, he's always going to have that on him. And for Kevin Holland to always have this on Chimaev, for this loss to hang over him, it will matter. It will matter to people. Khamzat might lose, bounce back, 3, 4, 5 straight victories, get himself back in the title conversation at 185 or possibly 205 if that's in his future. Definitely that could happen. For sure. But it's a long climb back up if he loses to Kevin Holland. I don't care if it's a decision. I don't care if it's like a flash KO. Unless it's some really super weird, fluky thing, there's a lot on the line here for Khamzat. So, yeah, great new character, but he's got to back it up, as he has done many, many, many times in the past. But especially on Saturday, he's got to do it because otherwise, man, those boos from the T-Mobile Arena were very real. And I have a feeling they're going to follow him to other venues that he travels to in the future. So good luck, Khamzat, I guess.
Yeah. Let me add one other aspect to this, because I think there is also now just a legitimate question you have to ask regarding Khamzat Chimaev moving forward. And we were talking about this much earlier in the day, Mike, you and I, where it's just, there is now a real question of whether this guy is a welterweight, right? Because we saw against Gilbert Burns, it was very difficult for him to make the weight that time. And then this time he comes in so heavy. It's one thing to miss weight. It is another thing entirely to just not even get close. Khamzat Chimaev was not even remotely close with this one. 7.5 pounds would have been 8.5 if it was a title fight. If you're the UFC, can you trust this guy now to make 170 on the dot in a title fight? I think that's a very legitimate question that we're going to have just sort of following this guy now. Like, is he a middleweight who is eventually going to end up at middleweight, maybe sooner rather than later? 178.5, man. That is so large for this division. I feel like there's so many consequences for Khamzat Chimaev that are going to follow him from this, that it's just like, it's crazy to me again, the degree to which he has messed this up.
It's pretty unbelievable. Now, on the flip side, I'll go back to you, Shaun. We see Kevin Holland. He's freaking Hulk Hogan right now. He's the guy. He is the ultimate babyface. Got a gigantic reaction. He's the guy. And while everything seems to be on the line for Khamzat Chimaev, this is as must-win as it gets, considering everything that happened. Kevin Holland, and I know it's getting a little cliche, especially in 2022, to play the house money card, but Kevin Holland is playing with house money right now. Of course, he wants to go in there and shut Khamzat Chimaev up. Of course, he wants to go in there and beat this guy and be able to get the rub off of this. But the fact that Kevin Holland is taking this fight against a guy he admitted when talking to Joe Rogan, this is a much tougher fight than Daniel Rodriguez, but he said it's going to be fun. The fact that he is stepping in and fighting freaking Khamzat Chimaev, who massively missed weight, he is the man right now, isn't he? I mean, he deserves so much credit. I mean, as you mentioned, all these fighters, everyone involved deserves credit, but Kevin freaking Holland, I feel like this guy is taking the biggest risk of all, but it actually doesn't mean all that much. Losing doesn't hurt him all that much, but if he beats Khamzat Chimaev, boy, is he going to reap the benefits.
Oh, there is no question, Mike Heck. Can you imagine a world where after all of this, after all that we have seen this past week, this past year between these two, just in general, the hype, everything, that Kevin Holland becomes the guy who on 24 hours notice, less than, goes in there and beats Khamzat Chimaev and does it maybe in a way that's convincing, knocking him out or something. Because I assume that's going to be the only way he can win this fight. That man will become a cult hero. The same way that Nate Diaz became a cult hero after he submitted Conor McGregor on very short notice. It's not going to be to that degree, obviously, because that is a very, very unique circumstance. Conor McGregor is a very, very unique person within our history of our sport. But god damn, man, if Kevin Holland goes in there and does that to Khamzat Chimaev, he is going to be beloved by everyone in that arena right now who was booing the hell out of Khamzat Chimaev. Kevin Holland is going to be absolutely beloved by the MMA fan base, and it's going to be crazy to see because I don't think it's outlandish. I said this before we started recording. I don't think it's outlandish to say that if Kevin Holland wins, he's getting the next title shot. Like, just sit and think about it. If you go in there on 24 hours notice and you beat Khamzat Chimaev, who for us is the number 3 welterweight in the entire world, and I think the UFC probably has him at number 2 or whatever. If you go in there and beat him on 24 hours notice, that's it. Like, you're made. That's it. You get the next title shot. You get the chance to whatever. I doubt Kevin Holland would even want to sit out and wait because obviously we have the trilogy to wait for. But I'm just saying, like, there is so much for Kevin Holland to gain from this. And you're right. There's not very much for him to lose because I think a lot of us, myself included, I know we're going to make picks soon, but think he's probably going to lose because it's just a very stylistic, it's a disadvantaged stylistic matchup for him. He has historically struggled against wrestlers. We saw it very much at 185. It hasn't been that long since then, right? Like, how quickly can you fix that gap in your game, especially against someone like Khamzat Chimaev, who is so good at it? But man, again, can you imagine? Like, there are very, very few opportunities in MMA where that opportunity is there, that moment is there to seize things, to change the essence of your entire life. And that is what is going on right now for Kevin Holland. This has been a crazy 24 hours for him between yesterday and today. And it can only get crazier if he does what he needs to do tomorrow.
All right, let's get into picks because I do want to give Daniel Rodriguez and Li Jingliang some shine. We'll go to the peeps as well. AK, we begin with you. Let me just pull up the current betting lines here. Khamzat Chimaev, minus 580 favorite. Kevin Holland comes back at plus 440. Who gets this done?
This is Khamzat's fights to lose. As Shaheen said, historically, Kevin Holland's just not great against wrestlers, and now fighting him on with no preparation. I mean, I'm sure I'm sure in the back of his mind, he's always thought he might have fought Chimaev someday. And obviously, based on some of the losses he took at 185, of course, he's worked a lot on his takedown defense and his wrestling. But I think you really, to even have a chance to Khamzat, I think you need to be preparing for him full camp. I don't even know if that would help, again, given Holland's takedown defense weakness. So yeah, kudos to Kevin Holland, the Trailblazer, for taking this one. Huge upside. We say kind of low risk. I'll say it's a little bit more medium risk, because I think getting your ass beaten by Khamzat under any circumstances is just not great for you. So I'm not overthinking it. Certainly, there's ways that Kevin Holland can win this fight if he's able to keep it on the feet. We've seen Chimaev can get a little undisciplined in there. We saw that in the Gilbert Burns fight, and if he wants to prove something, especially given the bizarre week he's had, and say like, oh, I can knock him out in the feet, and he can certainly do that too. He's got power. But, I mean, on the feet is where Kevin Holland has a chance. On the ground, Chimaev's going to have him for dinner, much like he did plenty of dinners before weighing in on Friday and missing weight by 7.5 pounds.
Oh, wow.
AK Lee from the top rope.
Chimaev by submission.
Where's the box of redemption chime, Casey? Because, I mean, that's perfect time for it. We just went to the land of make-believe, like on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood right there. Unbelievable. AK just chucking strays out there. Shaun, seems like you're going the Chimaev route as well. How does he get it done?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, this is just what it is. It's a bad style matchup for Kevin Holland. As fun as all of this has been over the last 12 hours and as interesting of a place we landed, it ultimately still is Khamzat Chimaev. Probably by TKO, first or second round. Maybe Holland can stretch it to the second. But you know exactly what we're going to see just as well as I do. Khamzat Chimaev is going to get takedown after takedown. He's going to maul Kevin Holland on the ground until that fight is over. And I think that's just ultimately... I would be stunned if it goes the other way. Let's say that.
You guys make very great points. This, in most situations, is an easy pick for me. It is a Khamzat Chimaev tackle, ground and pound type of scenario where Kevin just gets beat and there's really nothing he could do about it. He's just beat by a grizzly bear, essentially. But I ain't going that way.
No.
I'm mixing it up. Because
best friend, what are you doing?
Chaos.
I'm gonna do it. I'm doubling down on the chaos, and here's why. This has been an emotional week for Khamzat Chimaev. The guy, obviously, well, he was unapologetic about the weight miss. The fact of the matter is he missed, and he struggled badly getting to even to 178.5, right? So that plays a factor. The other thing that really plays a factor here is when this fight was first being discussed, I didn't even think about a 5-round factor. I know Kevin asked for it. I still didn't think it would happen, but now we got 5 rounds. And I view this not similarly to how I viewed the Chimaev Diaz fight, where the biggest question I have right now is what happens if this fight gets into the 3rd round? Kevin Holland's still going to be loose as a goose, talking smack, trying to get under Khamzat's skin. Again, it's going to take a lot for him. He's going to have to weather a storm or two, but Kevin's a pretty durable dude. And I just see this fight get extended. I think Kevin's just going to have some swagger to him. I think he's going to have a chip on his shoulder. And I think he knows how tough of a night he could be in for. And he just doesn't give a damn. So I'm going with the superhero himself. I'm going with Kevin Holland to survive maybe a 10-8 round, maybe 2 of them. And this fight gets extended to the championship rounds, and somehow, some way, Kevin Holland gets it done with some crazy ass finish that we didn't see coming. We're going to be standing on our feet, trying not to wake our children up with our screams, but Kevin Holland gets it done. Now, if this is any other fight week, any other location, without all of this chaos, I would not view it this way, but I have to take these things into account. How is he going to react to the fans when he's fighting? Because in Jacksonville, those fans went freaking crazy, and Gilbert Burns punched him in the face, and Khamzat's like, oh, I'm not used to this. This is kind of fun, so I'm just going to have fun right back. And now things are personal. Like, he legitimately hates Kevin Holland, and I'm sure the feeling is mutual. We're going to see Khamzat in a couple of different places that he hasn't been before. He's going to have this crowd booing the hell out of him. The crowd's going to be chanting Kevin Holland. Kevin's going to be talking smack. And I think, well, we talk about this week getting to Chimaev. I think this could just be a volcano effect where everything just erupts. and Holland reaps the benefits of it. So give me the upset here. I mean, I'm looking at the betting lines. You're giving me Kevin Holland at plus 440 with everything going on. It's a tough bet. You might be reaching a little bit, but there is value considering how this week is gone. And I could take the physical tools into play, but I could also take the mental tools into play. And it feels like Khamzat Chimaev's having a tough time this week. And I think Kevin Holland's gonna be rewarded. He ain't gonna love it. He's gonna be hurting on Sunday, but he's gonna be hurting with a victory and probably a post-fight bonus in his bank account. Let's go. Kevin Holland with the upset.
Look at
All right.
that.
Wow, from the man who brought you Roman Kopylov by knockout, Kevin Holland will be.
And I was right.
You were right. You were right.
Touche.
None of us picked it. None of us picked that. We thought, and I think I said you were crazy. So
you you chastised me.
I did.
That was the first time you ever chastised me. I
cackled at you. I cackled at you.
I do want to talk about Daniel Rodriguez, Li Jingliang, because these two guys deserve a ton of credit as well. Daniel Rodriguez did his job, took this fight on 2 weeks' notice. First fight after 3 hand surgeries, been out for almost over a year after the big win over Kevin Lee. This guy was active. He was winning. He should be undefeated in the UFC. And frankly, he should be undefeated in his entire professional career, but he got hosed by judges twice, once in the regional scene, once in the UFC against Nicholas Dalby. And now he takes on the gangster himself, Li Jingliang, who, according to his manager, Tim Simpson, when he was asked about this fight, Li, as the competitor that he is, said, okay, no problem. I'll fight this guy. Now, of course, you had to negotiate and make sure it was worth the squeeze. Apparently it is. And now Li Jingliang is going to remain on the card. He's going to fight D-Rod. Shaun, I love this fight. And if we're talking about like mixing of the martial arts and like actual divisional stakes where, I mean, we're looking at bottom top 15 guys who could make us climb up the ladder rung by damn rung. This is the one. Like this is just a great fight between two really tough guys.
It's 100%. It's a great fight between two guys who deserve a fight like this, but also you're right. When it comes to the actual rankings themselves, how we view the welterweight division, this is probably the most impactful fight of the three, just because both of these guys are sort of on that periphery, right? They're at least for us on MMA Fighting, I think they're both unranked, but they're both receiving votes, meaning people are voting for them to be in the 15, but they're not quite in the 15. So they're just right on the edge of that. And it feels like the winner of this will probably bump up into like a 15 or a 14 spot. It's a very competitive fight. And you're right. Daniel Rodriguez, I'm happy for Daniel Rodriguez in that I feel as if obviously the Kevin Holland fight would have been a bigger name for him, but he has deserved a spot like this for a while. He has been very, very good so far in his UFC run. And I think if you would just throw a fight between him and Lee just on a regular, any old fight night, wouldn't get the kind of buzz that we have been giving it the past day or two. But because of the circumstances and because of this strange way that all of this has played out, and just because of how frankly, both these guys are just badasses for rolling with the punches and just going along with this and saying, okay, yeah, we'll just fight whoever you want us to fight at the end of this, despite the fact that we both lost our big name opponents. This fight now has such an increased spotlight than it wouldn't have had otherwise. And it really is a very cool spotlight for both Daniel Rodriguez, but also Li Jingliang, who has, again, I hate to keep bringing it up, but didn't get to wear his damn suit. And that suit is so good. Like that was such an excellent suit. That's an A+ suit. And I have been in that position where you buy like a suit that you feel really great about and then you don't get a chance to wear it. You get whatever that is stolen from you. It hurts, man. It really hurts when you don't get that chance to shine like you can shine. So I love this fight for both these guys. I think, again, it will be a very competitive fight, very fun fight. And kudos again to Li Jingliang for taking a fight against a guy who's basically a different weight class than him and saying, yeah, you know what? No problem. Of course I'll take that fight.
Yeah. Love everything about it. We can make a pick here. We'll make a pick. AK, I'm sure you want to wax poetic, and then you can go ahead and make a pick after you wax poetic about the greatness that is this fight.
Yeah. Listen, like I said, it's nice to have a bout that does feel like super relevant, super directly relevant to the rankings. Because we've talked about how big the co-main could be for Holland. It's a little bit more unclear for Chimaev just because we don't know. Is he going back to 270? Is he stuck at 185? Is it just time to go up to 205? I mean, the guy is friggin' huge. Like we said, he's essentially the new age Anthony Johnson. It just doesn't even make sense that he was competing at 170. So while I think Chimaev is not far off from a title shot, I do wonder how the UFC will view it after he kind of caused this major headache for them. But you're only as good as your last fight. And, you know, if he has a dominant win, who knows? Maybe they fall in love with him again. But Li Jingliang and Daniel Rodriguez are definitely like deserving of a bigger showcase. And yeah, and I'm glad it is on pay-per-view. I'm glad it's not some, you know, fight night co-main event, which we're kind of like, you know, we're praising, but not, you know, it's not getting the attention that it gets being on what has suddenly become one of the most talked about pay-per-views of the year. Who saw that one coming? I mean, we all knew the main event would be big, but now Li Jingliang, such a star again. Yeah, as Sheen said, missing out and getting a shot of a suit at the press conference. Now missing out on a co-main event. Hopefully getting paid more money, as is you know, the other guys who had their fights shifted around. So yeah, it would be a nice way for him to cap off this weekend with a win. But I think I'm leaning towards Dan Rodriguez. I've been a fan of D-Rod for a long time. It is unfortunate that he's had to miss time because of the hand injury. He's a little bit up there in age. He was kind of a late starter in MMA. He's going to be 36 by the end of the year. So while it's good that he doesn't have a lot of mileage on him, again, he is just a little bit older, just in terms of real life years. So I think the time is now for him. I think he has the skills to get past a guy like Lee. I just think he's a little more technical, maybe a little less power, but I do like his technical ability. I do think this one's going to a decision. So because of that, I think if you're going finish, you would go with Li Jingliang. I think it's going the distance. I think Daniel Rodriguez is going to outbox him in a very, very entertaining fight. And again, neither guy should lose too much with a loss. Again, it should be competitive. And again, both guys, a lot of praise for accepting this new bout. But I will lean towards Daniel Rodriguez to win his fourth straight fight.
Shaun, do you agree? Will Li Jingliang be wearing his blue suit after the card, celebrating a victory, or celebrating, because he's still going to be smiling no matter what happens in this fight, or is he just going to be celebrating having a good time in the octagon with Daniel Rodriguez but didn't get his hand raised?
Yeah, I think I side with a lot of what AK is saying here, because ultimately I do think Daniel Rodriguez is the better fighter between the two. And also I think, you know, he's going to be the bigger fighter. He's going to be the guy who didn't cut down to 170 and was able to maybe enjoy himself a little bit over the past weeks, as opposed to really making that strenuous cut down to 170 in the welterweight limit. So I do side, I should say, with D-Rod as well. I think, you know, it's sort of long time coming for him. He maybe should have gotten a bigger opportunity sooner, but he has been pretty unlucky over the last couple of years in terms of the bookings and injuries and just everything sort of going on in his career. This is kind of his one chance. As AK said, he is a late bloomer when it comes to MMA. He is going to be 36 by the end of this year. This is sort of his one chance to make that run in this welterweight division. And I like his skills. Like, I think he very well could. So I am siding with him as well, but I cannot praise Li Jingliang enough for taking this fight, for rolling with the punches, and just dealing with what has been probably for him a very crappy 24 hours, whereas the rest of us are seemingly reveling in a lot of this. Li Jingliang really did suffer a lot of different, you know, hurdles that he had to go through on the process to 279. So a massive, massive credit to him.
Yeah, everything you just said, I agree with. I'm going D-Rod too. As a matter of fact, before all the chaos, I looked at it from a betting line perspective, but I was going to pick D-Rod to beat Kevin Holland as well. Obviously, things have changed and things are a lot different and things are a lot more heated and the chaos has ensued and chaos reigns supreme. I just felt like D-Rod was a really good matchup for Kevin and vice versa. I just thought D-Rod could pick him apart on the feet a little bit. His boxing's great. And what Lee does very well from a power perspective, D-Rod does very well from a technique and a volume perspective. And I think that's kind of shine through here. And you're right, Shaun. Obviously, he's going to have the size advantage here. Lee's obviously going to hydrate back up, but D-Rod taking the fight on short notice, it's probably going to be around $190 by the time this fight goes down. So yeah, give me D-Rod to win a fun decision. I think Lee's going to have his moments. I think the third round could get a little hairy for D-Rod, but I think D-Rod ultimately comes away with the 29-28. So we're not going to talk low-key banger because after today, all of these fights are low-key bangers. So let's just go to the people. I'm sure they have a lot of thoughts. They have a lot of opinions. Let's go to Suns Out, Guns Out himself, Mr. 3024, EKC Leiden on the ones and the twos. What do we got? What are the peeps talking about?
Rocking the Public Enemy, too. I love it. You'll love to see it. Right the power.
Let's talk about, and this seems like it happened a week ago, but this was just less than 24 hours ago.
Oh, right. Yes.
There was a press conference fight? Are you sure?
So
I feel like I would remember that.
Allegedly,
yeah.
So for people who don't know, I'm sort of the East Coast morning. Oh, Mike as well. Mike and I are sort of the East Coast morning people. So we're kind of there to get the news, you know, as early as possible. And one of our priorities this morning was definitely keep an eye out for UFC Embedded Episode 5. When it will be the most highly anticipated episode of UFC Embedded since Conor McGregor in Brooklyn throwing the dolly at the bus, which again, they did do an Embedded on that, did crazy ass numbers, the pay-per-view, whatever. That it's an instant that the UFC squeezed for everything they could, squeezed all the publicity out of it that they could. We thought they would do the same here. So since in a rare moment, just in today's society, there was somehow no because allegedly there was 250 people back there involved in this brawl, right? What's the number now? What was the final count according to the reports? Like 250 people.
It was a small village.
Have you seen those YouTube videos in like Europe? They have like simulations of medieval battles of 500 people on one side, 500 people on the other side coming at. That's apparently what was happening backstage at the UFC 279 press conference. And somehow, despite hundreds of people being involved in this melee, not one bit picture, not one bit of cell phone footage. Again, everyone was probably too busy fighting for their lives, trying to get out of there. But in today's day and age, in the post World Star world, there's no footage. Very strange. So people have been wondering for a long time, like, how much of it is true? A lot of weird reports coming in, rumors, hearsay, everything. And but we all thought it'll be at least somewhat cleared up when the UFC drops this Embedded episode, and just no Embedded episode today. They just we don't know why. We don't know if they're trying to maybe be we don't want to exploit this thing because the UFC doesn't do that. They don't like to exploit conflicts. They don't do that.
They don't need to now.
We got a comedian here. We got a comedian. Look at this guy.
So yeah, everyone who's we see, like you said, Casey, we see a lot of people questioning. I mean, really for the last 24 hours, where is this footage? What's going on? What actually happened? We still don't know, and it's starting to look like we never will. I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine, but UFC is certainly not in any hurry to share any footage that they might have.
So this is very strange and funny to me because there is a video. Like, I know people who have seen the video. There is video. And so I don't know why it's not out yet, because you're right. Were so many people who are backstage. How does no one grab their phone and just put it on IG stories or whatever, like Twitter or anything?
And this wasn't like just one sucker punch that everyone just missed.
No,
this was
an
like
extended
a thing that went for a while.
It was an extended thing. And the fact that we haven't even seen a public video of maybe like people getting calmed down or like just, maybe the aftermath of the melee or nothing. That is very strange to me, because there is video. Like, I know for a fact that there is video that has been seen by people of this thing. It is the past 2 days are two of the strangest days that I've ever seen in this sport. It is utter chaos.
Yeah, it's just weird. It is weird. We were talking about this on the morning weigh-ins, and about the weights, and we didn't think that the Leach and D-Rock fight could even happen, so we suggested that, but I guess that the commission just allowed it.
Well, they weren't going to reward Khamzat with a Diaz fight, and Diaz wasn't going to fight Khamzat.
Yeah, Diaz just straight up. Diaz just straight up was not.
Yeah, but I think what Casey's asking is, normally there's supposed to be a thing where someone misses weight by a certain amount, and the commission would not clear it. So how come they, just because? So how come it got right? It's confusing, right?
You're operating under an assumption that commissions have rules that they follow, and that generally they're going to try to follow their own rules. That's not how this works.
What are you saying? What are you saying? What are you saying?
Hashtag rules rule, baby.
Yeah.
But not always.
Oh my gosh!
You just call it a freaking catch. You just call it a freaking catch weight fight, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's what they did.
That's what they did. Yeah. Made it a 180-pound catch weight fight, and I guess that solved all the problems. But
which, by the way, we might be breaking a record here. 3 out of the 5 pay-per-view fights are catch weights. That has to be the most in the history of the UFC, right? Like, or at least the
Casey
modern
just got
era.
excited. Casey got excited.
I had that question set up, but like, is this the most catch weight fights you've ever seen on an entire card?
Oh. I thought you were going to specifically ask about Barnett and Collier.
Oh, I was going to get that later, but
okay. Well, that's a little tease. That's
for the fan Q&A tomorrow.
Yes, this is definitely the. Listen. I'm sure. I don't know if Michael Carroll is out there throwing some stat out, but 6 catch weight bouts. 3 of them were originally scheduled. If you want to count the Aldana Chiasen one, which was changed at the last second. But yes, 6 in total now. The final count. 6 out of 13 fights. That's almost half the card. Almost half the card turned out to be catch weight bouts. We've never seen anything like it.
So Bellator of UFC.
Just ripping off the competition.
Yeah. We've all been pretty positive today, I think. Let's go to normally positive Joseph Bozo. It's kind of being a little negative Nancy today, but let's acknowledge this at least.
Are people just happy because Nate has a winnable fight now? It's hard to care when the main event is two guys who are combined 1-7 in their last 8 fights. I mean, we kind of addressed this earlier, but
no.
So what?
People are happy that it's not now the main 2 fights of this card are not 2 assassination attempts on 2 legends of the sport. Like, I don't want to feel bad when I'm watching my fights on Saturday, and now I'm probably not going to have to feel as bad as I would have watching these fights. That's why people are happy. Also, because Tony Ferguson's deserved an opportunity like this for a long time, and I'm not going to do this again. But like, let Tony Ferguson make his damn money. Like, that's great.
Yeah, I'm going to say something controversial here that's not going to make people happy.
Oh no.
Records in MMA, when we're talking about the quality of fights, don't matter as much as people want to think. It's cool when a guy's 27-0, 28-0, 29-0, but at the end of the day, guys, the most important part of combat sports is, do you want to see 2 people fight each other? Is this the best timing for this fight? I don't know, maybe not. But it's Nate Diaz and Tony Ferguson. It's an amazing style matchup. It's 2 of the biggest fan favorites of the past decade. What I don't care. They're 3-fight losing streak, 4-fight losing streak. Why does that matter? Why, these guys are good. This isn't a case where it's like, oh, like we see a fighter and we don't know who they are, or they have like a 16-10 record. They must not be that good. These guys' records don't matter. You know who they are. You know how they're going to fight. So I get it. It's better when you've got guys on losing streaks and contender implications. That's what people care about so much in today's real sports mainstream MMA age. But all that really matters is, do you want to see 2 guys fight? Look at some of the greatest matchups in UFC. You go back to Pride. You have guys on losing streaks and Pride fight each other. Who cares? It's just 2 guys we want to see fight. And so this is the epitome of that.
If this had never happened, if the last 24 hours had never happened, and 30 years from now or 40 years from now, someone told me like, hey, Nate Diaz and Tony Ferguson are about to get in a fight at the old folks home. Like, I'm going to try to watch that. Like, I'm going wherever that is, or watching it, streaming it instantly on my phone. Like, it's Nate Diaz and Tony Ferguson, man. Like, if you're not excited about it, I'm sorry. I think most of us probably are.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just gonna say this into a live microphone because I'm looking at it right now. 4.3 million of you. Some of you are probably watching this right now. 4.3 million of you bought Floyd Mayweather versus Conor McGregor in a boxing match, and we're complaining about Nate Diaz versus Tony Ferguson punching each other in the face in a competitive fight for 25 minutes? Are you kidding me right now? Are you kidding me right now? Enough is enough. This is going to be a fun fight. Yes, and by the way, even with the Chimaev booking, it did nothing for either guy. It was nonsensical. Yeah. If you did Nate Diaz versus Vicente Luque when Nate was like, hey, I'll fight that Luque dude. He's fun. At least Luque could gain something from beating Nate Diaz. What does Khamzat gain from beating Nate? He gained nothing. And Nate's stock doesn't drop. If the UFC has this, hey, I'm going to put him out to pasture kind of thing, Nate's fine. Like, people expected him to lose. He's just going to throw the birds up. He's going to walk out of the T-Mobile arena. He's going to go box Jake Paul and make a floppity jillion dollars. So this, who cares? Like, who cares?
That seems very scientific, that number.
Yeah, that's right. I punched it in the MMA fighting computer. Sorry, AK.
That thing costs so much money.
That thing costs so much money. You can't be using it willy-nilly.
Our budget, please.
4.3 million. 4.3 million people bought Floyd Mayweather versus Conor McGregor. Conor, no chance. And anybody who had a half a brain knew that. And then 4.6 or 7 million of you bought Mayweather Pacquiao like 5 years after the fight should have freaking happened in the first place. So don't talk to me about spending money on winnable fights and guys are past their prime when there's like 10 million pay-per-view buys on the table for Floyd Mayweather versus Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather versus Manny Pacquiao 5 years past the due date. Come on now. Get it together.
Mike is like turning Dana White red. I love it.
Thank you for the question, Joseph Boza.
Thank you. I love you, Joseph.
I'm not done. Let me add one more thing. Because like Casey, you and I in particular came up in the era of Pride, right?
Yeah.
And what was one of the best things about Pride? Not everything has to be about titles. Not everything has to be about championships. Not everything has to be about rankings and meritocracy. Like, things can just be fun for the sake of being fun. And this is fun for the sake of fun. Why are we mad at that? Well, MMA should be more like this. I want every type of legend, like fading legend, to be having these type of fights rather than feeding Tony Ferguson to like Jake Matthews or whoever. Like, let's just have fun because fun things are fun. And I don't know why you'd be against fun. Like that's all. That's all I'm saying.
Ultimate Fun Championships, people. That's why they call it UFC. Jeez.
We are so much.
Can we just like things?
Yeah.
Like, come on.
We are so much more fired up about this card than we were like last week. Let me tell you that right now.
So much better than
Yeah.
it was
Dude,
24
if
hours
people,
ago.
If
Dude,
people could have seen our meetings we had about this card a week ago, it was a little grim. I will paint you a grim picture. That's all I'll say. It was not. We weren't like this loud. I'll tell you that.
You know, during the
we were having internal fights about who could cover social gloves instead of watching this card.
That is a real thing.
He's not joking. I'll be like, what a no, that's real.
No one asked us about no one asked, but were you surprised, or I don't know the word is, for the face off between Nate and Tony? It was very respectful, very martial artsy. I don't know. I didn't want to call it. It was no mean mugging. It was nothing. It was actually something I wanted. I didn't want them to fake it because they're gonna have their mean faces on tomorrow. We know that. But I think today, both of them just had a lot of respect for the other person right in front of them. I don't know. Did you get that feeling? The weigh-ins today, the ceremonial weigh-ins, yeah.
100%. It's two legitimate living legends who have invested most of their lives into this game, right? Like just martial artists to the core who would be doing martial arts regardless of whether this exists or not. Like, absolutely. I think there's tons of mutual respect. And Nate even said it, like Tony Ferguson is a G and Nate's a G. Like they are the OGs of this division at this point. And like, they deserve to have this type of thing. I still love you, Joseph Boza. I still love you.
And I know you do like Boza.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's a fair question.
It was a fair question. If my little brother walked in here right now and said that, I'd be like, get the hell out of my house. So,
all right. One more question, because I think this fight is a very important fight to talk about, but of course doesn't have the shine. But let's talk about the ladies' fight on the pay-per-view card.
Is a title shot on the line between Irene Aldana and Macy Chiasson, considering Macy can't make 135? I mean, to me, to me, it was always like if Aldana won and did so impressively, she gets her name in the discussion with like Ketlin Vieira and I guess in some respects Juliana Pena, because she just was the champion before losing to Amanda Nunes. But I don't know, man. Like, do you think there's title implications here, AK? Like, do you think if, let's just say Macy Chiasson goes in and wins the decision against Irene Aldana, do you think the UFC is going to rush her into a title fight with Amanda Nunes? And on the flip side, if Aldana goes in there and just has a great performance, maybe stops Macy Chiasson, does she jump to the front of the pack?
I will say I do think yes, Macy has had trouble, and maybe she has made
the catchweight was on Macy's side, by the way.
Yes, our pal Danny Segura, did. I was mentioned that earlier. I saw him tweet that.
Okay.
Yeah. So yes, in that. So there is their case to be made, but she did make it several times in the past. I think this kind of taking short notice fights, kind of jumping in between weight classes, has been really bad for her. She went up for a fight with Raquel Pennington on short notice, and then she fought again at 145 against Norma Dumont. I think if she, and it's great. I think being able to take fights in two weight classes is good for you, like, career wise. But I think if she really is focused on getting a title shot at 135, I mean, you just have to stop taking those fights. I get it. You got to stay busy. Everyone's got to eat. But hopefully she gets a string of good luck with health wise and logical opponents for her and can stay at 135. I haven't quite given up on her making it. She is big for the division, but not so big that I don't think she can. Again, she made it several times in the past. We actually put together a decent kind of cluster of wins there. Definitely Aldana, more likely to get the title shot. She's higher ranked. She's more well known. She's fought the tougher competition. She's got some losses in there. Holly Holm, that's fine. Everyone loses to Holly Holm, 135. But just the fact that she was booked against her kind of tells you how highly they view Irene Aldana. A fan-friendly style. So she puts on an impressive performance, like almost like a Whitaker versus Vittori type performance, like a little 3-round masterclass. She'll remind people very quickly that she belongs. And again, she's another person who, yes, this fight 140, her last fight she missed weight. I think she'll be okay. I just think there's been injuries and issues with being able to stay healthy that get in the way of making weight. I could be wrong. Maybe neither Irene or Macy can consistently make 135 anymore. But assuming they can, then yes, Aldana is definitely closer and a fresh matchup for Amanda Nunes. So I would look forward to that. I really kind of hope that happens. Though the Macy's a good talent as well.
Shaun, anything to add to that?
No, I think that was pretty thorough. Like I said, like AK said, I think Irene Aldana, this is mostly about her and whether she can be sort of the next person at 135.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. 2 last things I want to say before we get out of here. One, Tony Ferguson told Megan O'Leary during their backstage little interview after the weigh-ins that during the backstage brawl, he offered Nate Diaz a mint. So maybe just his kind-hearted, giving nature helped lead the MMA gods to shining the spotlight upon us.
How can you not love this man? Come on, people.
Like, this fight's just so much better now.
Who's your favorite Ninja Turtle? I'm Leonardo.
Come on. And the last thing I do want to say, because I know this is a card that was kind of like mired in weight misses and stuff like that, and I know that's a big storyline heading into this, but there was one weight miss that I do want to say, and I know, especially AK, we've talked about this a lot, and on to the next one, that we typically really penalize weight misses. We're not big fans of it. It's unprofessional, all that stuff, but once in a while, I'm willing to forgive it. And for the Beast Boy, Chris Barnett, I'm willing to offer that up right now because, I mean, I'm not going to go into everything that's going on with him. You could just go on the internet and look it up for himself. The guy's had a friggin' horrible year. He's had a lot of loss, a lot of tragedy within his family and within his life. And the guy's still showing up, dancing at the freaking ceremonial weigh-ins, missed weight by 1.5 pounds. With everything that this man has gone through this year, personal tragedy and all, I'm willing to give the man a pass on this one. I'm not going to rip him apart.
Yeah. And missing weight created what I think, in at least the modern era of the UFC, the heaviest fight we've ever seen in the UFC. 265.
You're just waiting. You were just waiting.
So God bless you, Huggy Bear. God bless you. I hope you're doing great, and hope you have fun.
Because if theoretically, if 2 fighters weighed in at 266 at the limit, that would be what, 532. Is my math correct there? Someone check my math on this. So I guess this would be like
right.
This would be what, 0.5 over that, because Chris Barnett came in
533 and a half, baby.
Yes.
Fight in the UFC.
Wow. History is being made.
History.
Chris Barnett, thank you. Thank you for helping us make history. Khamzat
Thank you, Chris
Chimaev,
Barnett.
thank you.
And UFC, you're welcome for us bringing that up and getting you some big pay-per-view buys there to see the heaviest fight in modern UFC history.
Yeah, I want to see that factoid come across the screen. Yeah.
Yes, you can spend your money buying pizza and then clicking on the remote and putting on ESPN News, and you can watch Chris Barnett versus Jake Collier, which should be a lot of fun. So, listen, this has been. I don't think we'll ever forget this day. If we're being honest. And I feel like this energy is going to carry into tomorrow. And I can't wait to talk about it some more with you.
How much talking have you done?
A lot. I've done a lot. So, yeah, a whole lot. So much talking. And then yesterday, a lot of talking too. So I'm going to eat some pizza and go to sleep. That's what I'm going to do. So thank you very much for watching. Thank you for following along with us all day long. We'll be back at 5:15 Eastern tomorrow, 5:15 p.m. Eastern. People's Pre-Fight Show to get you ready for the chaos. We're going to put a cherry on top of this chaos Sunday. So for Shaheen, for AK, for EKC Leiden, I am Mike Heck. Get some rest. Big day tomorrow. We'll see you then.
We love you guys.